Russians don't take a dump, son, without a plan.
We're gonna play football. Yippee!
The CFB on OSG with your host, the Online Sports Guys.
Thank you, Tommy Palmer, and welcome to The Review. We're talking college football here on the CFB and OSG. John here, Phil there. The other John, he's on assignment somewhere out there doing something, making money for the company. We like that.
Shooting video.
Yes, there you go. And I hope that Phil and I sound much better because we've invested in new microphones. And yes, mine here. We just got to get Brother John to do some shopping. But anyway, we hope you like the new and improved sound of the review. And we're going to get started. Well, before we get started, I want to remind everyone out there that the College Football Debrief is deep into previews. And you'll expect those to be dropping. In fact, our big picture show will be dropping tonight, where we talk about the Clemson, Alabama Part 5 possibility or Part 4 in the title game, and other musings as to who might challenge the Clemson, Alabama axis. So look for that, and then we'll have the Big 12, Pac-12 preview shows coming your way, and ACC. All those have been cut. And I mentioned the Pac-12 because, Phil, we want to start.
All on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
That's right. So, and Phil, we want to start. We talked about the Pac-12. We want to start with the Pac-12 because they completed their media day on July 24th in Hollywood. And basically coming an end to the talking season in college football's fall camps start this week around college football. But they kicked around the idea of kicking off games at 9 a.m. Local time out west. Which is equivalent to an East Coast time of 12 noon. And Chip Kelly of UCLA and Justin Wilcox, the head coach at Cal, have both said they will be the guinea pigs as far as doing a 9 a.m. kickoff. We know why they're doing this, Phil. It's the so-called East Coast bias. They want to get a jump on on television as much as the other conferences on the East Coast do, and play for a normal time, I guess, for the East Coasters. Good idea?
I mean, it's still a proposal at this point, and the reaction's been kind of mixed. And yeah, I mean, really, when it comes down to it, the whole premise of the idea is to get more eyeballs outside of the West Coast. And really, when you think about it, most of the SEC, Big 12, Big 10, ACC games, the premier games don't start until the 3:30 window. I mean, you're talking about going up unopposed against what used to be the JP Jefferson Pilot games or the Raycom games back with the noon kickoffs. And those are the kickoffs. Like if you're an SEC fan and you're told that your team's playing in the noon game, you're screaming like, what did we do? What did we do?
Well, if you're a Central Time team in the SEC, you're kicking off at 11 a.m. Mm-hmm. I remember those kickoffs when I was covering the Arkansas Razorbacks.
And it's not universally loved. There's a lot of concern that the fans aren't actually going to show up, because essentially what you're asking college students to do, even more so than alumni who have graduated and moved on to daily lives, if you've got somebody like, say, in Oregon who plays a good hour or so outside of a major metropolitan area where they draw a lot of their fan base and alumni support, for a 9 o'clock kickoff, 9 a.m. Eastern time kickoff, you're talking about having to leave the house at 6, 7 o'clock in the morning just to get to the stadium.
Tailgating starting at 5:30 a.m. That'd be interesting.
And while
bring your eggs and sausage.
There's nothing wrong with a Bloody Mary breakfast or anything like that, but That's a big ask, particularly if you're trying to get students to actually come to the game. I mean, think about
Well, yeah, because they've been partying since all night, probably getting home around 3 a.m. And next thing you know, you got a football game at 9 a.m. Well, why sleep?
I mean,
Sleep at the game.
yeah, and the downside of this is it's pretty much playing to all the fears that college football has become a business that's all about pandering to TV
Right.
instead of being about something for the kids, for the alumni, for the students, the faculty, and for the people of the university. They're basically playing the game for a TV contract at that point.
Right.
And that's the direction. The game's already heading in that direction. This would be the first real admission that that's actually what we're here for. And that worries me a lot. I mean, that's changing the whole nature of the sport, really, if you think about it, isn't it?
Yeah, you've been talking about reaction from coaches as well. Mike Leach had a good point. Do any West Coast fans actually think it's a good idea to have 9 a.m. games? Question mark. He tweeted that.
Mm-hmm.
And the Colorado athletic director, basically, his comment was, there needs to be some research because will the students be there? And we just brought up that point as far as, these 18 to 22-year-old college students on Friday night, they're blowing off some steam and getting in around 1, 2 a.m. in the morning. And, will there actually be, look, even the dogs are complaining about the 9 a.m. kickoff. Will they actually show up to a 9 a.m. game? Are we going to see a lot of empty seats? My thing is, what teams are going to be in that 9 a.m. window? You brought up the fact that the 12 noon kickoffs out on the East Coast and the ACC and the SEC, those are usually the bottom feeder teams. They'll probably get, maybe a good local rating, but that's about it. So you're going to get a good dose of Oregon State, Colorado, and Arizona, I guess the bottom feeding teams of the Pac-12 will see that 9 a.m. window. I'm just kind of worried about the player body clocks. I mean, 9 a.m. I mean, they're going to be doing early workouts, I guess, before school starts at about 7:30.
Yeah.
Well, again, the facility at 6 a.m. probably for a 7:30 workout, especially when you're down in the desert area of Southern California and Arizona, where it gets mighty toasty this time of year. But I'm kind of worried about the body clocks of the players, and will there be an injury factor with that going full bore at 9 a.m. Getting prepped for that? I mean, you got to be at the facility by 5 a.m. to get taped up to get whatever treatment you need and go through whatever your routine is before a game. When is breakfast? Is breakfast 4 a.m., 5 a.m.? I mean, I'm sure I imagine there might be a couple once some research is done. There's going to be a couple of games at 9 a.m. If UCLA and Cal want to play their game then, either at Strawberry Canyon or at the Rose Bowl. If they want to do that, then great. We'll see how it works. But I'm not really a big fan of it, especially if I lived out in West Coast. I mean, now I have a little experience with this because when I did high school football for Georgia Public Broadcasting, they gave me the 9 a.m. games at the state title game. So it can be done, but it's still, are you awake by then? I guess when you take your first, if you're a ball carrier and you take your first hit, yeah, you're awake by then.
It's a big ask. And I mean, if you think about it, we talked about the TV part of this. One of the things that this season's going to change a little bit over seasons past is Fox Sports is looking to try to launch their morning version of College Game Day. To go up against him. And one of the things that was brought up in that discussion was to try to get a marquee game for the noon kickoff for them to come straight out of their college football pregame show. This might be a way for them to do that because
Yeah.
this show is going to be based out of Los Angeles,
Right.
and mostly done in studio. And this gives them the opportunity to do that. And they're basically playing to that West Coast audience. The question is there going to be an audience on the West Coast that wakes up, like we were just talking about, first thing in the morning, and the first thing they do is turn on the TV to watch college football?
Go ahead.
I think the answer to that is no. And granted, all of this is still a preliminary discussion. Larry Scott basically confessed that the idea has been thrown around, but he's not sure he's going to get enough support to even get it through. It's just with everything that the Pac-12 has been having going on over this offseason and the past couple of regular seasons, this season where they're looking for an independent financier to come in and finance the league, basically throw out a couple payments in order to get them so they're making the payouts that the other 4 Power 5 conferences are. It's a lot to digest.
Yeah.
I couldn't imagine this is something that they're going to be doing this season, particularly since the schedule's already out. Granted, not all the times have been assigned, but I would not be surprised to see if the Pac-12 goes through another year where the teams don't make it to the college football playoff or aren't considered top 6 teams. Don't be surprised if you see it happen at least once or twice next season or the season after.
Well, the other thing, I'm speaking from experience here too, because I lived out on the West Coast for about 3.5 years. I remember when I was living out West, one of the independent TV stations carried the JP SEC college football package. And I had a couple of roommates, and I would get up early and watch the random Mississippi State Kentucky game, or Auburn and maybe Arkansas. That always seemed to be in that 12 o'clock window. This is back in the early 90s. And they thought I was insane for getting up that early to watch a college football game. Well, when it's ingrained in you, you do it. And, if you're, I just don't know. There is a pretty significant fan base for Pac-12 football, but I just don't know if they're dedicated enough to get up that early and attend a football game. We shall see. I'm interested to see how this progresses, as it's experimented or it's talked about. But let's move on. More Pac-12, because they're going to move their championship game from Santa Clara to Las Vegas for 2020, 2021. They're going to play in the Raiders' new stadium. I think this is a good move by the Pac-12 because it gives them a city that's starving for these kind of events, and it's kind of a centralized location for the Pac-12 championship game. The city wants it, and I think it'll help progress the game. You got to have some good teams in there, but that are highly ranked and battling for something. But I think this is a good move.
Oh, and just a prime reason that that's a good move would be just looking back at what happened in the Pac-12 title game this year being played at Levi's Stadium in Santa Clara.
Tickets were $5 for that game.
They couldn't pay people to go to that game an hour south of San Francisco. And it was a bad idea from the get-go in a city that wasn't a college football city. Las Vegas, all you got to do is say sports and people are going to show up.
Yeah.
And even if they don't show up, they're going to take at least some casual interest. Getting the fans, getting students, getting the fan base excited to travel to Las Vegas for the championship game, that's not going to be a difficult sell for any of the schools, no matter who's playing in the game.
Right.
When you sit there and say, spend $500 and fly to San Francisco and then spend $250 a night on a hotel and then drive an hour south to go to our championship game in Santa Clara, that's a much more difficult sell.
Right. And it's drivable from Southern California, from Arizona. It's a little bit of a tough drive, but it's drivable from Arizona, from Salt Lake City, It's probably a little bit of a long haul from Northern California. It's a cheap flight from Portland or Seattle to go and watch your team in the Pac-12 championship game. I just like it that they're moving to a facility. There's a lot to do there. Everything's kind of contained in Las Vegas. And, the one thing this championship lacked was kind of a signature place for their championship game. Obviously, the ACC has Charlotte. They've established Charlotte as their conference championship site. Atlanta for years has been that for the SEC. Indianapolis seems to be the go-to place for the Big Ten, and the Big 12 has married themselves to Jerry World. So this is where the Pac-12, you think about the marketing opportunities, the road to Vegas or whatever they want to call it. It's just a great move by the Pac-12. Really, this might be the first step to rehabbing their football image in moving this game to Vegas, because in this season it's going to be back at Santa Clara, and there'll be no atmosphere, and tickets will be $5.
Yeah, and the Pac-12 has, particularly since Larry Scott's taken over, has just had a track record of one weird decision or one bizarre backward step pretty much every step of the way for the last 4 or 5 years. And this is the first step forward, I think, that they've taken in some time. That may or may not change with this whole 9 o'clock kickoff concept that we just talked about earlier in the block, which could get them attention for either the right or the wrong reasons. But at this point, what do they have to lose?
Oh, I agree.
They're overshadowed by pretty much nothing. They are overshadowed by the other 4 parts of the Power 5 conferences. They don't get the publicity. They don't get the attention. They don't get the audience. And if you've got to go outside the box to do it, this isn't a bad way to start.
Well, Anthony Goldman and I had a pretty spirited discussion about the Pac-12 and their issues and what teams really need to be good and what teams will be good in our Pac-12 preview show. We'll be dropping that in the foreseeable future. Once again, we've got a bunch of preview shows, conference preview shows on the College Football Debrief, starting with the Big Picture show, which will drop sometime this coming Sunday. Look out for that. And we hope as you listen to these conference previews, you'll go to our Twitter page at OSG Sports and give us an opinion. And Phil, that Twitter page has been pretty dormant lately. We need to get the fans excited, and read some of their tweets out there.
Yeah, I mean, we're all over social media. We're always there monitoring OSG at OSG Sports, both on Facebook and on Twitter. And don't forget the phone apps, guys. We've got a phone app. Look up OSG Sports on either the Google Play or look it up on the Apple Store. It's not hard to find. It's free. It gives you access to all of our content. Yes, as we show it in our camera shots. It gives you access to content not only from us, but our friends up in Canada from barnburner.ca. And if you're a podcasting hound, we're on all the podcasting networks. Spreaker's our host. We thank them for everything that they've done for us, to help promote the product. And we're, again, Spotify, the Apple Store, the Google Play, all the podcasting sites that you can think of. You can pretty much find us there. And when we come back, we've got more stuff to talk about today, including alcohol and Cajuns. A good mix, a bad mix. What do you guys think? We got that more coming up. What else do we have coming up?
Flax optional in Baton Rouge. We also got the Big Ten thinking about perhaps they're going to realign. Well, divisions. Is it popular? And UConn writing a big check to the American Athletic Conference. All that and more coming up as a review continues right after this.
Everybody buckle up. Buckle up.
Let's go.
Buckle up.
Can we go to the store? Mom,
Buckle
can we get some
up.
ice cream?
Everybody buckle up.
A lot goes on in the car, but you're in control. So only move when you hear the click that says they're buckled in. Never give up until they buckle up. Learn more at safercar.gov/kidsbuckleup. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Apolinski and Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Apolinski at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Apolinski is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Welcome back to The Dog Show. Up next, we have Satchmo. Satchmo is a member of the Shelter Pet Group.
That's right, a group known especially for their couch-snuggling, ball-chasing, face-licking, and, of course, companionship. Now, let's see him in action.
Look how he makes eye contact with his person.
That's actually known as the treat stare.
How intuitive, and now he appears to be excitedly turning in circles.
Ah, the happy dance so common with this group.
But really, the best way to know an amazing shelter pet like Satchmo is to meet one.
Visit theshelterpetproject.org today. Adopt.
Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
If you want to scale a mountain, buy boots. If you want to turn your crush into something more, say hi. At Country Financial, we know protecting the things you love and preparing for tomorrow start with simple steps. So we help you take small steps today with insurance and financial services that can have a big impact on your family's future.
For all your home, auto, and life insurance needs, call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871.
We hold the world ransom for $100 billion.
Welcome back to the review. John here, Phil there. The other John, he's doing other things. He'll be back next week, perhaps.
I hope so, because I won't be here next week.
Well, might be a solo act for me. Anyway, we want to remind you that our conference previews are starting to drop. We'll be dropping our big picture show, talking about Clemson, Alabama, and whether they got some challengers. And then we'll drop the Big 12 conference preview, Pac12, and then ACC. And then we'll have Big 10 and SEC as well. We're going to stay in, I guess, the group of five in the American and the UConn Huskies. And this is a athletic program that's been financially challenged, especially the football program. And they're going to move to the Big East after this season. And the Huskies will officially leave UConn Huskies will officially leave the American on July 1st, 2020, a little less than a year from now. And Phil, they got a $17 million exit fee to settle, and they've got 6 years to do so. So that's a pretty hefty check they got to write.
Hefty. That's a lot of money. I mean, the Huskies are out of the AAC come July 1st of next year. And they've got basically 7 years to pay back $17 million, a couple million plus a year. They're already running what is it? I want to say it was like $7 or $8 million in debt as an athletic program.
Mm-hmm. And the football program has got some debt issues as well.
Yes. And it's a lot of money basically just to make the football team an independent and go away and just kind of go and hide so the basketball team can go back to doing what the basketball team did back in the 1980s and the 1990s. It's an interesting strategy. It's a little different than most colleges have been when it comes to football because most of them are trying to get into a big conference in Division I football bowl, subdivision football,
right?
In order to get the big TV payout and everything else that goes along with it,
right?
The Huskies are actually they may actually be the first of the big schools or decent-sized schools that I'm aware of that have actually tried to deliberately take a step backward as a football program. And to me, it speaks to the viability of college football and the way that it's developing over the last couple of years. I mean, heck, you talk about a $17 million exit fee from the AAC.
Yeah.
This comes on the heels of last week, LSU announcing that they were spending, when we're going to talk about this in a minute, $28 million for an athletic facility. I mean, the disparity between the haves and the have-nots in college football is just insane.
Well, the Power Five schools are starting to separate themselves from the Group of Five schools, albeit the American did get a pretty good television contract out of ESPN, which is going to serve them well, which UConn will not benefit from as they go independent and not part of a revenue sharing conference. So they've got some challenges. I think the funds to settle that $17 million exit fee is going to have to come from the success, or whatever success the women's and men's basketball programs have when they progress into the NCAA tournament. So a lot of that money is going to be earmarked toward there. And whatever the football program can do as an independent, they're going to have to rely on paycheck games, probably for the foreseeable future, and play a lot of those Power Five schools for guaranteed money.
In other words, AKA the practice team.
Yes. I don't know. Randy Etzel's a pretty good coach. He may pull off an upset here or there, but it's going to be tough for UConn to do that. But I think you're right. You're bringing up a good point where you bring up LSU, and we'll bring that up here in a minute. What they're doing as far as facility wise and what UConn's got in front of them. And let's move on to the Big Ten before we talk about LSU, because there's talk right now in the Big Ten about realignment of the conference or the divisions there. And, I never could figure out who was in the legends or the leaders. And then now you went back to East West, and you pretty much know who in those divisions now. So why would they want to change?
Somebody's thinking too much, I think, is the problem there. They're putting a little bit too much thought into the fact that the teams in the East seem to be dominating when it comes to conference play in football and conference championships and the like. When you've got a conference that's loaded with Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan and Wisconsin all in one. Well, Wisconsin's not in the eastern side, but you still got Michigan State, Penn State, Ohio State all playing in the East. It's kind of tilted a little bit in one direction. And from that perspective, I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it competitive all the way around. But you've got it set up to where logistically it makes the most sense already. The travel partners and the playing partners are relatively close to each other for the most part. There aren't too many big trips. I mean, the furthest trip for anybody is having to go out to Nebraska, which is a whole separate conversation. I think they're putting a little bit too much thought into the whole idea of one side dominating the other. I think that will balance itself out. The SEC's dealt with this for the last, really since the rise of Alabama about a decade ago, where nobody's really been able to push them from the East. I think Georgia's started to do that here in the last two seasons. But the SEC hasn't messed with it, even though the East hasn't won the conference championship in God knows how long. That's a lot of money. I mean, the Huskies are out of the AAC come July 1st of next year, and they've got basically 7 years to pay back $17 million, a couple million plus a year. They're already running what is it? I want to say it was like $7 or $8 million in debt as an athletic program.
Mm-hmm. And the football program has got some debt issues as well.
Yes, and it's a lot of money basically just to make the football team an independent and go away and just kind of go and hide so the basketball team can go back to doing what the basketball team did back in the 1980s and the 1990s. It's an interesting strategy. It's a little different than most colleges have been when it comes to football, because most of them are trying to get into a big conference in Division I football bowl, subdivision football,
right,
in order to get the big TV payout and everything else that goes along with it.
Right.
The Huskies are actually they may actually be the first of the big schools or decent sized schools that I'm aware of that have actually tried to deliberately take a step backward as a football program. And to me, it speaks to the viability of college football and the way that it's developing over the last couple of years. I mean, heck, you talk about a $17 million exit fee from the AAC.
Yeah.
This comes on the heels of last week, LSU announcing that they were spending, when we're going to talk about this in a minute, $28 million for an athletic facility. I mean, the disparity between the haves and the have-nots in college football is just insane.
Well, the Power Five schools are starting to separate themselves from the Group of Five schools, albeit the American did get a pretty good television contract out of ESPN, which is going to serve them well, which UConn will not benefit from as they go independent and not part of a revenue sharing conference. So they've got some challenges. I think the funds to settle that $17 million exit fee is going to have to come from the success, or whatever success the women's and men's basketball programs have when they progress into the NCAA tournament. So a lot of that money is going to be earmarked toward there. And whatever the football program can do as an independent, they're going to have to rely on paycheck games, probably for the foreseeable future, and play a lot of those Power Five schools for guaranteed money.
In other words, AKA the practice team.
Yes. I don't know. Randy Etzel's a pretty good coach. He may pull off an upset here or there, but it's going to be tough for UConn to do that. But I think you're right, though. You're bringing up a good point where, you bring up LSU, and we'll bring that up here in a minute. What they're doing as far as facility wise and what UConn's got in front of them. And let's move on to the Big Ten before we talk about LSU, because there's talk right now in the Big Ten about realignment of the conference or the divisions there. And, I never could figure out who was in the legends or the leaders. And then now you went back to East West, and you pretty much know who in those divisions now. So why would they want to change?
Somebody's thinking too much, I think, is the problem there. They're putting a little bit too much thought into the fact that the teams in the East seem to be dominating when it comes to conference play and football and conference championships and the like. When you've got a conference that's loaded with Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan and Wisconsin all in one. Well, Wisconsin's not in the eastern side, but you still got Michigan State, Penn State, Ohio State all playing in the East. It's kind of tilted a little bit in one direction. And from that perspective, I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it competitive all the way around. But you've got it set up to where logistically it makes the most sense already. The travel partners and the playing partners are relatively close to each other for the most part. There aren't too many big trips. I mean, the furthest trip for anybody is having to go out to Nebraska, which is a whole separate conversation. I think they're putting a little bit too much thought into the whole idea of one side dominating the other. I think that will balance itself out. The SEC's dealt with this for the last, really since the rise of Alabama about a decade ago, where nobody's really been able to push them from the East. I think Georgia's started to do that here in the last two seasons. But the SEC hasn't messed with it, even though the East hasn't won the conference championship in God knows how long. Well, actually, Georgia did that one year, and then they lost the national championship. Why mess with a good thing?
I'm finding it interesting that this was a discussion at the Big Ten Media Days, and I don't know who brought it up, but a couple of athletic directors, Bill Moose at Nebraska and Barry Alvarez at Wisconsin, they were asked about it, and they were clueless about it, about the whole division realignment thing. That it was news to them. It wasn't even discussed in the spring meetings. So I think your point about somebody thinking too much is there. It sounds like to me some underling somewhere in the Big Ten or in an athletic department somewhere was at some gathering there at the Big Ten Media Day and just mentioned about a division realignment, and it just caught fire. But I don't, once everybody knows where teams or what divisions they're in, why you want to mess up a good thing?
I don't think they'll do it. It was PJ Fleck who kind of was the guy who had everybody turning their head and said, PJ said, what?
Oh, so it's PJ Fleck. That's right.
Yeah.
If I would have clicked this icon right here, I could have told you that.
There are some points, like I said, the East has won 5 out of the last 5 Big Ten title games. I get that. But it will balance itself out over time. It's just a matter of a Nebraska or Wisconsin stepping up and getting to the level where Ohio State and Michigan are, although that might have something to do, again, with, wait a minute, money.
Well, I think the ACC is dealing with that right now with Clemson dominating on the Atlantic Division. By far the Atlantic Division, but dominating the Coastal as well, and the Coastal being a frickin' mess. Let's call it that way. Let's bring up LSU while we get a chance, because maybe they can help UConn with a GoFundMe contribution as they try to figure out their exit fee. But you brought up $28 million toward facilities. But before we get to that, we want to talk about beer sales at Tiger Stadium. Well, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and talk about your facilities first, because we can talk about the beer sales afterwards. But
one might have something to do with the other here.
Yeah. So the arms race continues, and LSU is part of it.
Yeah. The LSU Tigers announced about a week ago, basically debuting a video and showing it off to the players, their brand new locker room and athletic facilities. Total cost, $28 million.
That's a SEC network money.
No, actually, believe it or not, it's money that came from donors and boosters.
Of course.
At least according to
deep
LSU.
Pockets that are Tiger fans.
You're talking about a university that is operating on it structurally for the rest of the school, that's operating on a budget that's about what it was in 1992, 27 years ago, and has some facilities for classes and student facilities that are struggling to make it to standards. But hey, the football team, they have sleep pods, they have mood lighting, they have everything and anything that you could ever possibly think of in their own customized air-conditioned facility. And the bad thing about this, well, I guess it's all in your perspective. The thing that bothers me about this is they're just trying to keep up with the Joneses, really, at this point. They're trying to keeping up with the Alabamas and the Clemsons, and to a lesser extent the Georgias and Ohio States of the world, by taking the money that they have and spending it on something to be able to say that they spent it. They can't spend it on the kids. They can only build so many new stadium upgrades inside of the stadium. So now they're just building athletic facilities.
Well, who upgraded the arms race and all these facilities was Northwestern, because they have put together a phenomenal facility that is the rage of all the college football, and now is the new standard bearer. And so LSU, the other purple team, has got to keep up. And you're going to see more and more of this, from the waterfall at Alabama to the sleep pods at LSU to a juice bar wherever. It's part of the arms race, part of getting the best athletes to come to your campus to sell them on your program. So we can hem and haw all we want to about the money going here, but as long as the TV money is as big as it is, and as long as you got boosters that are willing to write some large checks to get their name put on the building, there's not really much you can do. And the other schools are just going to have to tap into whatever donor base they can, beg, borrow, and steal, and see what they can do.
You're talking about the operating budget of every school combined in the Sun Belt. For one,
that's true. That's true. I mean, it's part of college football now. The arms race began back in the early 2000s, as more and more TV outlets were discovering it as a great way for programming, and the ratings pretty much dictated that this is a sport that can its only rivals the NFL. And so money began pouring in. Boosters want the prime seats. Now you've got the luxury boxes. Power Five schools are going to be awash in cash for a while. What I will say is probably in the mid 2030s, when all of these media rights start coming up in the SEC and the ACC and the Big Ten, will the marketplace still bear the cost that we have now? I think that's, and I think the Big Ten has got, the Big 12 has got their media rights coming up soon. So we'll see how that, as well as the Pac-12, we'll see how those two deal with media rights right now. And I think that's going to be kind of where it'll forecast what will happen probably in the mid 2030s when the SEC, ACC, and I think the Big Ten, their deals with ESPN and Fox Sports begin to come up, whether they'll be extended at a much larger cost, or will we see kind of a decline. And with the streaming services starting to come into play, I think that's going to be a big factor in all this. Probably going to be at least 10 years before we see any kind of change as far as money and arms races and all that good stuff. And then fan interest. Will the fan interest stay the same? That's the other thing.
Well, my question is, how do you justify, if you're a team that plays in Conference USA or the MAC or the Sun Belt or any of those conferences, and say, yeah, you're playing in the FBS with all the big boys, but you're never going to get to compete for a championship?
Well, that's where they need to come together, that group, the FCS, and decide whether they want to have their own national championship. And I think there will be some kind of interest in the television networks to do that. Now the Power Five schools will probably fight like hell to prevent that, because they want to tap into those teams to come to their place for
breather games.
For a breather game, for the most part. The American probably won't get a lot of play in that, because they can actually compete with the Power Five schools, and that's a big thing about the American. They have been able to maintain excellence, even though they've got a lot of challenges ahead of them. Dana Holgerson wouldn't have left West Virginia for Houston if there wasn't some kind of talent base and fan base and donor base there, and if it wasn't in the American. So I think we're starting to see that league. And that league is trying to get in what they call the Power Six, and I just don't see it happening in the near future. So that's where maybe that league can band together the other group of six leagues and see if they can just play amongst themselves and have a national title game. I think there's some value there for a television network to tap in. And I think they would get a pretty decent number if, let's say, their title game is Wyoming and Houston. That might get a pretty decent number, and you might get a pretty sizable crowd if you play it at a nice facility. I think any talk like that, though, is probably at least 5 to 10 years away. We've got to see some football programs UConn is a definite example. Well, we got to see more and more schools start to face that issue before it becomes to fruition, in my opinion. But right now, it's just the Power Five schools are making some major coin, and the Group of Five schools, a few are doing that. The rest are kind of at the break-even point.
Yeah, and it's disheartening in some ways, but it is what it is, I suppose. We're talking about LSU. We've both been there to games in Baton Rouge, at Death Valley.
Mm-hmm. Great atmosphere. Love it.
What do you think about the new the school announcing that they were going to allow sales of beer and wine in the general public areas during the game?
Well, Death Valley at night has just gotten much more better. That's what I've thought.
Much more better.
You don't want what? Why bring a flask anymore? That was tradition at LSU. Bring a flask of your favorite. Your favorite strong liquor, I guess, is the best way to put it. But now you can just get it there. And primetime game on CBS. Can you imagine that, or ESPN? Fourth quarter, what do you think it's going to be like, especially if LSU is up front?
I mean, if you've never been to Baton Rouge for a college football game, you really need to add that to your list, your must-do list, your bucket list of college football, because there's nothing like the tailgating experience there. The people, by and large, even if you're one of the opposing teams, except for maybe Alabama fans, they're welcoming. They love to have a party.
Yes, they do.
They have a good time. They laugh, they eat, they drink, and they grill pretty much anything that you could possibly imagine being grilled.
You better like your food spicy and your alcohol strong.
Yes. And lots of it.
Yes.
It's actually kind of interesting. I read something yesterday where they said somebody made a comment that it might actually be better to have them drinking beer and wine in the concourses during the game.
Yeah.
Than have them smuggling in flasks of 90 proof alcohol. Because while they may get drunk, they're not going to drink as much if it's beers. They're not going to get as drunk on beer and wine as they would on the grain alcohol.
Yeah. It also depends on how much a mug of beer costs at Tiger Stadium. Places tend to jack those prices up.
A little bit.
Just a little bit. I mean, if it's a $10 cup of beer, which some places are known to charge $10 for that, you might be limited in funds as to how much you can have, rather than just bringing your own in and, tapping into that. Or you can do both. I just think it's going to be interesting. You just turned Death Valley into a party zone.
You've turned what was already one of America's best tailgating party zones into an even bigger one.
I just want to see a night game at LSU at Tiger Stadium with beer sales going full tilt, fourth quarter close game, and how rowdy that place is. If it's like against Ole Miss or Alabama or whatever.
If you think your alumni stadium gets loud during a home game, I'm not even sure what you could attribute it to. Pre-game fuel notwithstanding, the stadium is a humongous building. It's probably physically the largest stadium that I've ever been inside. And it is packed to the gills no matter who they're playing.
It's well built.
When they're playing.
It's the only fan base I know that actually caused an earthquake when they cheered. The earthquake game was in '88 against Auburn, where the fans got so loud that the earth moved. The LSU fan base is the only one I know that has done that.
Yeah, the USGS actually registered vibrations from the ground at their earthquake monitoring site.
It was on the Richter scale of some kind. So maybe they'll move the earth again with the alcohol sales. Okay, Phil, it's great getting together. Again, we want to remind you that we've got our conference preview shows that will be dropping all this week and next week and the weeks after that. Starting off with our big picture show, and then it's Big 12, Pac12, ACC, Big 10, SEC, and they will be dropping. They will be dropping quite a bit. So please give us a listen. We'll post that up on our OSG page on Twitter, and we'd love to hear your comments as far as our conference preview shows. So, Phil, any last words?
Nope, I think I'm good for the week. I will not be here next week. I will be traveling with the lovely bride on vacation for a week out on the West Coast that we talked about earlier in the show, enjoying the sights, sounds, and a few other odds and ends there. So hopefully you and John will have a good week, good shows. I will be on the lookout for the shows that you're dropping with Twitter to Anthony as well.
All right, well, have fun on your vacation, and appreciate it, and good conversation as always. So we hope you enjoyed the review. For Phil Canner, I'm John Wilkerson. So long, everyone.
Over? Did you say over? Nothing is over until we decide it is. Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
German? Forget it, he's rolling.
It ain't over now.